Being stalked by a complete stranger is quite terrifying. But being stalked by someone you know, or well, used to know for a long time, is also terrifying. Especially when you're being stalked by someone that you have been knowing for a long time is quite of terrifying itself. But maybe not the same as being stalked by a complete stranger because you don't know what that particular person is capable of, or what their true motive or their mental state at. But I have quite an extensive stalking story myself. In fact, I was stalked by someone I used to know for 10 years. I was so terrified in the end of all this. And I was so terrified I had to go through therapy for quite some time. And honestly, I don't even know what made this particular guy so obsessed of me to stalk me for 10 years. I mean, it is creepy itself. And I can go back as far as 10 years ago when I was 16 years old. I just started high school, and a while back earlier, I was so excited to start high school with my best friend Sandra. We have been best friends since elementary. In fact, we call each other as the long lost twin sisters, even though we didn't even look like the same. And we had only a few months apart between our birthdays, but we still called each other as sisters. But when we were starting getting high school, we started talking about boys, makeup, and all kinds of things that we usually do talk about. At the time, we even had a boyfriend. But sure, Sandra was pretty much in love or had a crush on all the boys in the school, but I wasn't really much interested in any particular boy at the time, but eventually would. But one day when I was at my locker, this was around after the school was over for the day, I found this note. It said, "Roses are red, violets are blue, your eyes are beautiful as emeralds. Signed, Secret Admirer." And Sandra, she was like, "Oh, you're a secret admirer." Sure, I felt blushed and I felt, well, okay, back then I felt very appreciative that someone actually had a crush on me. But since I had no idea who it could have been, this school had at least a couple of hundred students. And honestly, I didn't even know who it could have been. I mean, I didn't have the same class, but they were same male students all the time. So I didn't even know who it could actually have been from. So I somehow kept the note, and this note continued to repeat. And I tried to figure out who it can actually been. But every time I thought it could have been someone I know, I did ask around, but for some reason, each of the boys I did ask that I were close to, close friends, all denied or said no, that wasn't even them. Even Sandra and I started to be acting like to work as detectives, trying to figure out who this particular secret admirer had gonna been. I mean, I felt flattered that someone actually had a crush on me back then. Well, at the time at least. But I didn't even know how things would eventually change for me. I mean, I tried to figure out who this particular secret admirer were. I mean, I tried to even hide behind some another corner to see who this could actually been. But each time when I tried, no one ever showed up. When I left, it somehow seems that this secret admirer was aware that I was trying to see him, or as Sandra said, what she said, like, what if this wasn't a boy? What if it was a girl who had a crush on me? That was one thing I didn't even expect though. I mean, I was only into boys, and it was complete obvious, to be honestly. But over time, I didn't know what exactly to accept this. I mean, I was pretty much really unaware exactly what to do next. And these notes continued, and they were only friendly. They were really a poems or a short message saying, "I love your eyes. I love your smile. Your smile makes me feel happy of joy." And those messages on the notes always felt made me feel appreciated or flattered. It made me feel happy that I made someone happy. I mean, I have seen some students at the high school were, well, feel depressed or didn't even want to go to school at all. But overall, these notes continued for quite some time until I started to have a crush on a guy, a boy by the name Robin. Robin were my boyfriend after a few months when he asked me out. And those notes suddenly stopped for a while. So I thought maybe this secret admirer somehow Kim realized or find out I actually had a boyfriend and perhaps back off. But those notes continued to come back. But instead for there were still some poems, but there was also some of the messages said that how could you do it? How could you break my heart like that? And I mean, how could I break someone's heart without and even know who this particular individual person were? I mean, it's unlike that I would left a note in my locker for this person to even to read it. I mean, even if I put a note on my locker and for my secret admirer, and like, I mean, if the secret admirer would have been brave enough to actually come forward to tell me who he or she were, I would actually been honest about myself. But now to have Robin as my boyfriend, I didn't even expect this. And the secret admirer probably had expected my relationship with Robin would not work long lasting. Sometimes high school relationships are not much long lasting, but even though may not be much irrelevant, but Robin and I are still together to this day. And in fact, we are engaged. But that's anyways in that. And me and Robin continued to be dating, and the notes from this secret admirer continued, and it continued still to be friendly poems, trying to win my heart over to this individual. But it didn't work. And after some time, those notes became more as aggressive, like almost threatening messages. Like, how could you do this? I'm gonna cut your heart out to make you suffer as you had cut my heart out. It was like, I felt a little bit uneasy, and Sandra, who was quite unnerved about these particular messages, and even though she told me I should report this to the principal or teacher, but I told her, I told her, it's not much they can do about it, since we don't even know who this particular individual is. We don't even know who this secret admirer is. Since there are a lot of the students at the school, and we don't even know who can be doing this. And it was heartbreaking for her to understand that, but she understood. If we had known who this particular individual secret admirer had been, then easily we could have reported this to the principal or a teacher for this strange behavior or these threatening messages. And sure, I do regret I never told anyone, but like I said, there was nothing much that the teacher or the principal could have done. Even if they would have confronted this particular stalker, or this, well, I've actually called it a stalker, but this secret admirer to show up. But never happened. And eventually, The messages became even more terrifying. I regret still today I never told my parents at the prison as soon as these threats started to appearing. This particular person said, I will follow you around as I feel like, and no one can stop me. No one can stop us being together. That is our destiny. You are my Eve, and I am your Adam. Apparently, this Sigrid Meyer had started feeling that I was his supposed secret wife or something. And it wanted to suddenly, when I said, when I turned 17, I actually got my first cell phone at a time. I was like very excited. I had only put Sandra and Robin and out a few close friends' number in it. But Sunday, just out of the blue, a text message from a strange number that I didn't even recognize. It said, I have your number now, so you can't escape from my life. You belong to me. You should remember that. Leave that wordless boy so we can be together. Signed, Secret Admirer. I was now furious and scared at the same time. First of all, how in the world did this now, what I will refer to calling as a stalker, how did he even in the world did he even find out my number? There were only a handful of people that actually had his number, and in fact, I had asked everyone, all of those people, and no one actually had even handed out my number to anyone else. And I asked if it is possible that someone had borrowed their phone and looked at the contact list number. No, they wouldn't even do that. And in fact, I was feeling much scared. And even both Sandra and Robin tried to convince me to tell my parents. And even at the first I didn't want to do that. But Robin said, if you don't, this might only be getting worse. And I should have at the time, but I never did. And the stalker continued to send me messages on text messages or even voicemail, but where he was breathing in the messages and in the voicemail and saying, I will find you. I belong to you. We will be together, and so many other strange messages that he left behind. And throughout my 17 and 18 years birthdays passed, this stalking continued. I had changed my number multiple times, but somehow still this stalker continued to get my number. And after like the 6th time, I decided I don't want to even have a new number, and I told Sandra and Robin that I'm not going to use my phone anymore, because this is just getting too weird. At this point, I had already told my parents, but they didn't believe me. I mean, at first they didn't believe me, but as they saw this, show them this, how the messages that I had on my phone, my mom started to believe me and felt really much, she felt really scared for me. And the next step my stalker did was to actually show up at my house, at somehow middle of the night, sometimes knocking at my window, but I couldn't see anyone. I even looked down to see if there was anyone who has tried to hide below or at the side. Nothing. I mean, I was like scared. So I asked my parents if they could install some security cameras or even some motion sensor lights outside. And my dad did install some sensor lights outside. And okay, that stopped at least the knocking on my window. But that started to somehow letters to appear on our mailbox. But the thing is, those letters was actually never being delivered by the mail service. Someone had delivered those mail directly to our mailbox. But it turned out either been so early in the morning or late at night. Now I started wondering, now at least this person knows where I live. And okay, if there's a student, it's not that hard to realize where I live. But now the messages started to be threatening Sandra and Robin. If I don't leave Robin, he would taking care of Sandra for me as a way for me to persuade myself to be with my stalker. I told Sandra about this, and she told her parents. They contacted police, but since there was much they can do, only to take report. And throughout this entire next year or so, my family started getting a threat. I only a younger brother at the time. He also were threatened, also mentioned in the threats that he was gonna kidnap my younger brother, but still be hand over this note, this letters to the police. But there was nothing much I can do, unless we had managed to capture this guy. And in fact, my dad had installed cameras after that type of threats started been happening. And we managed to capture a guy or someone at the mailbox. But unfortunately, there was nothing the police could do because this particular individual was wearing a hoodie over their face, so we couldn't see who actually did it. And they never actually found any fingerprints. So it turned out this particular individual had some gloves on the hands, so they wouldn't even leave any fingerprints. So somehow it may have wondered that this particular individual has some true crime experience or maybe some knowledge. That wouldn't have been excluded for my honesty. And for one entire school year of my high school, after I finished it, I was petrified how this stalker had been threatening me, and for at least I felt happy that he stopped threatening Sandra and my family, but only focused on me at least. But Robin, he was still being focused on us as well, for at least time being from now on. And when it came to me to choose to go to college, I actually went at least 2 states away for college. Robin, unfortunately, he went to another state for college since he had actually been offered a scholarship, and I was proud of him. But we maintained our long distance relationship, and we did see each other during the holiday breaks, which was something we could do. But this stalker, for some reason, actually found me at my college. I never even told anyone else much except Sandra, Robin, and my family about this. And how in the world did I ever find out unless I somehow had overheard this? I had no idea. This continued the stalker continued to stalk me, even at college. I was really starting to get scared. I actually had prepared myself to be having a pocket knife and a pepper spray on me 24/7, even if I'm out in public. I mean, I always made sure I was out with some friends at school, or even on campus, or in town. Whenever I went back home, I always made sure to have always my dad around me. I can say my dad is 6'5", and he's a former Marine, and he doesn't take any of such things kindly at all. But he wanted to protect me. He wished that I could just suddenly do something else. So he suggested I take martial art training or self-defense training, which I did. Frankly, that could have been one of those few things that saved me from this complete stranger. And suddenly the letters started appearing. It somehow, but this time, it was actually delivered by this actual postman. And every stamp was actually marked either from my hometown or in this new town, but mostly from this new town where the college was located. I was getting scared. Somehow my stalker followed me 2 states away. I was getting more scared for every second that passed. I tried to figure out who this particular individual were, and in fact, while I was at college, I had asked some old classmates from high school to figure out if they could help me to figure out who this creepy stalker could have been. And one day, the stalker slipped out on one of the letters. It wasn't signed "Your Secret Admirer," which he continued to do, even despite I was not in high school anymore. It was signed Oliver. I was like, Oliver? and it clicked. Oliver was another guy that was from high school, very shy guy. He barely had any interaction with me. We did have a few classes. Now at least I know who this guy were, and in fact I still have him as a friend on Facebook. And I told him that I know he is my stalker for the past almost 10 years. And he denied that he was even had done anything like it. I told him that I'm going to report this to the police, that I have his name signed on the letter, which he then somehow flipped and freaked out that he confessed he was the one who'd been doing this. I told him, you shouldn't have been so creepy. I mean, if you would have been honest about yourself in from the very start, it could have been something. But now you have been doing this for so long, being so creepy, don't want even to want to be with you. And in fact, Rob and I are really happy. We have been together separately so long, so why would I leave Robin to be with someone who is so obsessed by one individual person? And Oliver signed off on Facebook, and I didn't even hear from him for a few days. I thought maybe that message had somehow made him to realize I was now finally over. And boy, I was so wrong. Because only a few days later, at around 10 p.m., I heard his knock on my door, my actual room door, and was like, first a friend knocking. I was like, could it have been? Maybe one of my next door neighbors? But suddenly, as I was getting to the door, I saw from the peephole, it was Oliver. He was crying, and somehow apparently was so drunk of alcohol or something. He was demanding that I open the door so we can talk. I told him over from my outside the door, I'm not letting him in, and frankly, for the door was locked and dead bolted and chain lock. Another thing I should mention, Robin was over for the weekend. I was now done. I whispered to Robin that called 911, and immediately he nodded. He understood because he could hear this guy on the door try to explain that I was his girlfriend, and that I has been cheating on him all these years. And as the Robin was telling from the living room, luckily though that Oliver didn't even hear. And he explained that then a strange stalker had been at my door, and now he has been trying to slam against the door to get in, and I could actually see that he was holding a knife. And luckily for what I'd heard, one of my neighbors, who was a guy around my same age, heard this, opened the door, and told him to just get out from this building immediately because he was about to call the police. But Oliver just said, screw you, this doesn't involve you. Get back in your room and leave me to be with my girlfriend. We have these discussions. But he knew that I wasn't Oliver's girlfriend. So he just stood there, holding arms, like folding arms, like having this intimidated look. But Oliver wasn't even somehow fazed by it. And he still continued to argue with this guy and try to bang on me open the door. And as suddenly when then police showed up. 3 officers in fact showed up. The officers told Oliver to step away from the door and drop the knife. But he refused to even listen and he didn't even look at him. And he just ignored them that they were even there. He started banging and slamming against the door, and the police gave him one last warning to drop the knife and step away from the door or they will tase him. But he didn't face it much. So they used a taser, and it took him 3 times to drop on the floor. And this neighbor saw it all happen, and after Oliver was handcuffed, the neighbor gave his side of the story what happened, even though he never saw it from the fictionally, but he heard what he said. And I opened the door after the police had Oliver in handcuffs. When he saw me, he screamed, "How could you? How could you break my heart? After all these years, be cheating with that complete loser." And Robin stood behind me and said, even though he said just calmly, and I will say, Robin was the most cheerful man I ever had. Mostly other guys would probably freak out in anger, scream at him to screw you, you lose, I win her. But he was like, Oliver, you should have told her years ago. But since she never had any intention to be with you, or he could have said some that, but he said, Oliver, it's not gonna happen. Let it go. But he screamed that he would wait for her, even take 100 years. And I actually told the police officers that he has been stalking me for 10 years. And if they wanted me some reports, if they want some evidence, they can just contact my local home, the police department at my hometown for the reports and the evidence. And they did, which luckily they still had. And with that evidence and the damages he had done, and I did press charges against Oliver. And he was quite arrested for a long time. When his parents came to the trial, to the courthouse to see what happened, they were completely unaware of their son's so complete obsession of me. They pretty much apologized. They had raised their son to be a friendly, kind spirit, but this was completely opposite what they had been seeing from their son. In fact, ever since he started sending me letters in this in the college town, he had actually moved there, and I was not even aware of this. But luckily, with all the evidence, and it turned out he had this mental breakdown. So instead of jail, he was sentenced to a mental institution for at least a quite a long time. I think what it was around almost 30 to almost 30 to 34, 30 to 35 years. And I honestly think that was probably the best. And after all this, I was scared. I was scared that he would escape and try to hurt me or anything, but never did. I still had I was offered a therapy, which I did accept it, and which I had been going for a few years after this. And after this, I focused on my college and actually finished it, and I decided to stay in this town. And after Robin had finished his college, he decided to move to this particular town as well. And I'm not going to mention the town's name for more privacy. But after we bought our own place together, he took me to a restaurant and he proposed to me, and I said yes immediately. We had even set a date for the wedding, but we had planned for a wedding at least in the summer. And of course, Sandra was super excited for two things. Me and Robin are taking the next step, and that Oliver is no longer in my life ever, and it's no longer be any problem. In fact, he has been forbidden to even send me letters, even tried to, but never even had to answer them. And honestly, I think Oliver should stay away from me, and even if he managed to forget about me and then he focused on someone else, if the same patterns would had once again focused on another one person, it would happen again that particular individual would suffer the same nightmare, and the outcome of that's unpredictable. So I'm still happy that I'm still with Robin, the best man I ever could have been with. And Oliver, well, let's say that he is a past memory that I try to forget, even though he did give me nightmares for months or even a long time after. But Oliver, I know that we never will ever see each other again, but if we do, stay away from me. I have now concealed carrier. Thank you. Stay away.